She stood at my fence with a clipboard and a smile that felt like a threat. And in that moment, I realized my quiet farm was about to become a battleground. The HOA president, Karen, said my well belonged to the neighborhood now, and she said it like the son owed her rent. I laughed at first, then she sent a letter, then a truck. Then the sheriff's number flashed on my phone. Stay with me, because the twist that followed turned her power play into instant karma no one could script. I bought the farm for the silence. Acres of wheat, a weathered barn, and a private well my grandfather dug by hand decades ago. The deed spelled it out, clear as daylight, but Karen didn't read deeds. She read bylaws. Our HOA was meant for lawn colors and mailbox heights, yet she ruled it like a kingdom. When the subdivision ran low on water, she found a villain, me. She claimed the well-fed, shared aquifer, and therefore, by her logic, it was community property. She promised access for the greater good, while hinting at fines, liens and lawsuits. Neighbors whispered. Some apologized. Others filmed. Karen arrived with contractors measuring tape snapping like teeth. I told them to leave. She smiled wider. That night, I pulled the county records, water rights, and permits. Everything pointed one way. My well, my land, my rights. Still, Karen escalated. She scheduled an emergency HOA vote without notice. She sent a cease and desist demanding I stop withholding water. She even posted my address online, calling me selfish. The pressure built like a storm. Then came the knock. A deputy stood on my porch, polite and confused. Karen had reported illegal water diversion. I handed him the deed, permits, and a map older than the HOA itself. He nodded, took photos, and left. Karen didn't know it yet, but she'd just crossed the line that would unravel everything. Because karma doesn't rush. It documents. It waits for receipts. And when it hits hard. If you think this ends with a fine, you're wrong. What happened next flipped the script, exposed her abuse, and changed our neighborhood forever. By morning, emails piled up, tempers flared, and cameras returned. I slept lightly, planning calmly, trusting paper over noise. Friends reminded me bullies bet on fear, not facts. I brewed coffee, called a water rights attorney, and filed a public records request. Each step felt small, but together they formed armor. Somewhere across the fence, Karen prepared another move, unaware that every message she sent was sharpening the blade she'd soon trip over. The quiet before impact hummed, and I knew patience would outlast bluster when sunlight finally reached the truth for everyone watching. By noon, Karen's plan shifted from intimidation to spectacle. She called a special HOA meeting in the cul-de-sac, folding chairs lined like a courtroom without a judge. She stood at the center, clipboard raised, voice polished with false concern. We all deserve water security, she said, locking eyes with me as neighbors murmured. Cameras rolled again. I let her talk. Bullies reveal more when uninterrupted. She presented slides about droughts, shared resources, and emergency powers. She quoted bylaws out of context, skipping the parts that limited her authority. Then she announced a vote to grant the HOA temporary control of my well. No quorum, no notice, no legal counsel. Just pressure and applause from the few she'd primed. When she asked me to respond, I thanked her for documenting everything and declined to consent. Her smile tightened. That's when the attorney called me back. Calm voice, clear facts. He'd reviewed the permits and confirmed what I knew. The well was private, grandfathered and protected by state water rights. Any attempt to seize it would be unlawful. More than that, Karen's emails and posts suggested harassment and misuse of HOA funds. He advised a simple move, send a cease and desist, and request an injunction if she didn't stop immediately. I asked him to draft it. Karen sensed the shift. She pivoted, accusing me of hiding water during an emergency. I handed out copies of my permits to anyone who wanted them. A neighbor asked why the HOA never fixed its failing reservoir. Another asked where dues had gone. Karen tried to regain control, but questions multiplied. Transparency is kryptonite to control. The letter arrived by email before the meeting ended. Subject line: unlawful interference with water rights. Karen read it on her phone, color draining from her face. It cited statutes, dates, and consequences. It demanded she halt all actions, retract statements, and preserve records. Failure would trigger court action. She laughed nervously and declared the meeting adjourned. She didn't stop. That night, she sent contractors back with a lock for my pump house, claiming emergency authority. I called the sheriff again. This time I also called my attorney. The deputies arrived, reviewed the letter, and ordered the crew to leave. One deputy warned Karen directly about trespass. Cameras caught it all. Then the records request came back. Payments to a consulting firm owned by Karen's cousin. Expenses labeled water study with no report. Emails instructing board members to pressure me. The paper trail was thick, undeniable, and damning. By sunrise, I filed for an injunction. The court granted a temporary order within hours, stopping the HOA cold. Karen's power evaporated in black ink and a judge's signature. She still didn't understand karma's timing, though. The real impact was just beginning, and it would land where she least expected, right? In the seat she thought was untouchable. The injunction spread through the neighborhood faster than gossip. Printed copies appeared on doors, group chats exploded, and the tone shifted from fear to curiosity. People who had stayed quiet started asking for receipts. Karen tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. But court orders don't speak in maybes. They speak in stop. And everyone heard it. The next HOA board meeting was indoors this time, tense and packed. Karen opened with a speech about unity. But unity doesn't survive lies. A board member asked about the consulting fees. Another asked why emergency powers were invoked without a vote. I stayed quiet, letting the documents do the talking. When the treasurer admitted she'd never seen a water study, the room went still. Then someone mentioned the cousin. Karen snapped. She accused neighbors of betrayal, said I'd manipulated them, claimed the law was temporary. That's when my attorney stood and requested the floor. He outlined the injunction, the potential penalties, and the evidence of harassment and self-dealing. He explained fiduciary duty in plain language. Heads nodded, phones recorded. Karen interrupted. The chair ruled her out of order. A motion was made to suspend her pending investigation. She laughed. The vote passed anyway. But karma wasn't finished. 2 days later, the county released its audit findings. The HOA reservoir had failed inspection months ago. Repairs were deferred, while funds were diverted to consulting. Fines were assessed. A mandatory remediation plan was ordered. Suddenly the water crisis had a culprit, and it wasn't my well. Karen resigned by email at midnight. Short, defensive, no apology. By morning, the board accepted it and scheduled a special election. The injunction became permanent. The harassment claims moved forward. Her posts were deleted, but screenshots live forever. The sheriff's warning clip went viral in our local feed. People I'd never met stopped me to say thanks. I walked my fields that afternoon, listening to the pump hum steady and faithful. The well hadn't changed. The truth hadn't changed. Only the noise had faded. Neighbors waved again. A few apologized. I told them it was okay. Fear makes people choose silence. Facts give them a voice. Weeks later, the settlement came. The HOA paid my legal fees. Karen agreed to a non-disparagement clause and a permanent ban from board positions. The consulting firm dissolved. The reservoir was repaired with oversight. The neighborhood learned what power looks like without accountability, and how quickly it collapses under light. I didn't celebrate. I fixed a fence. I shared water with a neighbor who asked the right way. Karma didn't shout. It documented, corrected, and moved on. And as the sun set over the wheat, I realized the real victory wasn't winning. It was restoring balance where control had tried to replace community. Life settled into a quieter rhythm after the storm passed, but the lesson lingered like footprints in wet soil. The new HOA board knocked on my door with humility instead of demands. They asked questions, took notes, and listened. Transparency became policy. Meetings were recorded. Budgets were posted. Emergency powers were defined, limited, and guarded. The neighborhood felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from every mailbox. Karen tried to resurface once, sending a letter through a third party suggesting mediation. My attorney replied politely, citing the settlement. Silence followed. Accountability has a way of closing doors that arrogance wedges open. The well kept pumping, unchanged by drama, a reminder that resources don't create conflict. People do. I started a small workshop in the barn, inviting neighbors to learn about water rights, land stewardship, and the boring beauty of permits. Attendance grew. People brought snacks and questions. Kids learned where water comes from. Adults learned how easily authority drifts when no one checks it. The sheriff stopped by once, smiled, and thanked me for keeping things calm. Calm, it turns out, is contagious. The repaired reservoir came online with a ribbon cutting. No speeches. No credit grabbing. Just water flowing where it should. Dues stabilized. Trust rebuilt. The HOA shifted back to lawns and mailboxes, exactly where it belonged. Power shrank to its proper size. Every so often, someone asks if I regret not selling water during the crisis. I don't. Rights exist, so cooperation can be voluntary, not coerced. When my neighbor asked, politely, legally, I helped. When Karen demanded, I defended. That distinction matters. The videos still circulate, clipped and captioned. People call it instant karma. I call it documentation meeting daylight. The moral isn't to fight every battle. It's to pick the right tools. Patience, paper, and professionals. Noise burns out. Facts endure. On a cool evening, I locked the pump house and watched the stars come out. Each one steady, unbothered by who claims the sky. Land teaches you that time favors the prepared. Deeds over decibels, community over control. If this story travels, I hope it carries that truth. Because the real win wasn't embarrassing a bully. It was reminding a neighborhood how to govern itself without fear. And if you ever find a clipboard smile at your fence, remember this: you don't need to shout. You need receipts. If you loved watching this epic HOA showdown, don't forget to smash that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more jaw-dropping real-life karma stories. And comment below. What would you do if someone tried to take your well?